Okay, it is not Tuesday, but it is time for some quarterback tier rankings. Here is what I have done. This is the big one. All season, every Tuesday of the NFL regular season, I went through and I tier ranked quarterbacks based on their performance that week and that week alone. I put them into one of these 5 tiers: great, good, fine, poor, or trash. Now that the regular season is over, I am going through and I'm seeing who spent the most time in each tier, and that's where they're going to go for the season. And we'll see how it lines up with how we actually think of these guys. And we are going by division. I've already gone through. I watched all 18 of the Tuesday tier rankings, and I have my results here. We're starting with the NFC East with Jaden Daniels. Now, this will not surprise you, but the place where Jaden Daniels spent the most time this season, feels about right, was in the great category. Jaden Daniels was never below fine on this list. He had 2 games where he landed in the fine tier. Everything else was either good or great. What an absolutely unbelievable season for the rookie Jaden Daniels. Hard to ask for anything better for the Washington Commanders with their rookie quarterback than what they got out of Jaden Daniels this year. So he goes into the great tier for the entire year. Now, a lot of teams had multiple quarterbacks who played for them over the course of the season. The way I did it is if you started at least 3 games, if you started in at least 3 games, I included you on here because there's some guys who played in 1 game. And I'm not going to bother with that. I might mention them here, but I'm not going to put them on here, the tier ranking. If you started at least 3 games, you make it. So we have 2 quarterbacks for the Dallas Cowboys. The first, of course, is Dak Prescott, who really played the first half of the season for him. That's a name you probably haven't heard in a while because it feels like he hasn't played in forever. But he did play about half of the season. And overall, based on where he spent the most time in tier rankings, Dak was good. Out of all of his possible games, he had 1 week where he was great, 3 good, 1 fine, 2 poor, 1 trash. So he spent the most time in the good tier. Do with that information what you will. We are going with the full season here, and based on half of a season of Dak, he spent the most time in the good category. Cooper Rush is the other quarterback that took over for Dallas in the second half of the year after Dak got hurt. And Cooper Rush, we had a tie. So whenever there's a tie, I'm just going to have to make a judgment call. Cooper Rush had 3 weeks in the good tier. He also had 3 weeks in the fine tier, and then he had 2 weeks in the trash. So 3 good, 3 fine, and I got to decide between those 2. And ultimately, I'm putting Cooper Rush into fine. He's a backup quarterback. He had to step into an unfortunate situation in the second half of the season. I thought he did okay. Thought he did fine. So that's where I put him. Jalen Hurts with the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles got off to a slow start, but man, they turned it around quick. And based on where he spent the most time, Jalen Hurts goes into the good tier. A lot of Eagles fans might be mad about that, but according to me, he had 1 great, 3 good, 1 fine, 2 poor, 1 trash. So he spent the most time in the good tier. Excuse me, that was wrong. I was reading Dak's. Jalen Hurts had 3 great, 5 good, 5 fine, 1 poor. So he had a tie between good and fine, and I choose to put him into good. I make a judgment call on those ties. Okay. They also had Kenny Pickett start 2 games. He did fine in both of those. Tanner McKee started 1 in Week 18, and he was good. Okay, one last team in the NFC East, and it is the New York Giants. Remember Daniel Jones? He played the first half of the season for them, and he spent the most time in the trash. Daniel Jones was in the trash for most of the early part of the season where he played. Maybe he'll land on his feet somewhere else, but it was not going to be with the Giants. Tommy DeVito also played in 2 games, but remember I said you had to start in at least 3 to get included. DeVito had 1 fine performance, 1 trash. But Drew Lock played in 5 games for the New York Giants, And in those 5 games, he spent majority of his time in the poor category. Now, he did have that 1 week. He had that 1 week against the Colts where everything was clicking for him, and he kind of ruined the Giants' chances of getting a number 1 draft pick. Now we move to the AFC East. The Buffalo Bills had one guy who started all of the games, except for the last one. Mitch Trubisky played in Week 18 because it was Week 18, and he was trash in that game. But Josh Allen started pretty much the whole season, and it will come to no one's surprise that Josh Allen lands in the great tier. Josh Allen, out of a possible 16 games, he had 10 weeks where he was in the great tier. 3 good, 2 fine, 1 poor. I don't know what happened that poor week, but 10 out of possible 16 where Josh Allen lands in the great tier. That is a great season right there. Then we go to the Patriots. Jacoby Brissett started a good chunk of games. For 6 games, Jacoby Brissett started. And he spent majority of his time in the fine tier. Now, when it comes to a backup quarterback, I mean, look who's in the fine tier. Cooper Rush and Jacoby Brissett. These are backup quarterbacks who had to start for teams for an extended period of time. They did the best they could. We know the Patriots don't have a good roster, so Jacoby Brissett goes in the fine tier. And then Drake May, out of 9 possible games, Drake May spent most of that time in the good tier. Drake May, 6 good, 3 fine. So far and away, Drake May, according to me in these Tuesday tier rankings, Drake May was good for the Patriots, in spite of the fact that the Patriots are bad and they already fired their coach. Then we get to the Miami Dolphins with Tua. Now, Tua was an interesting one. Out of 10 possible games, 4 great, 4 good, 1 fine, 1 poor. So we have a tie between great and good, and I've got to make a judgment call on where Tua goes. As much as I like Tua, if given the choice between great or good, I am putting Tua into good. I can't give Tua, I can't put Tua into the great tier. He had some bad performances. He wasn't able to play in the last 2 weeks of the season when the Dolphins really needed him. I think the Dolphins have a lot of questions to answer about him, but if I have to choose between good or great, I will put Tua into the good tier. Snoop Huntley also played in 5 games for the Dolphins, and he spent majority of his time in the poor category. I think it is worth noting that early in the season when Snoop got in there, he had barely even been on the team and he was already having to start. That is, of course, not a good situation for anybody. And last but not least, in the AFC East, it is Aaron Rodgers with the Jets. As I said the other day, I want to give Aaron Rodgers his props. Everybody, loves to give Rodgers a hard time, but he played in all 17 games for the New York Jets, stayed healthy, and when they were really bad and out of it for that last little bit of the season, he could have taken himself out, but he kept going out there, kept competing. I think he deserves some credit for that, and he spent majority of his season. Well, I'll be honest with you. We had a tie. 5 great performances for Rodgers, 2 good, 5 fine, 4 poor, 1 trash. So we had a tie between great or fine. And I've got to decide which one I'm going to put him in, and I'm going to have to put him into fine. I can't, based on the season that the Jets had, I can't put Aaron Rodgers in the great tier. He had some real stinkers in there. A lot of those great performances were back at the start, toward the beginning of the season. I think he had 1 late, but if given the choice, I'm going to put Aaron Rodgers into the fine tier and only the fine tier. Let's go to the NFC North with the rookie Caleb Williams. Tough season for Caleb, but at the end of the day, he lands in the fine tier. That's where he spent most of his time. 2 great, 5 good, 6 fine, 3 poor, 1 trash. So he had 1 more fine performance than good. He was 1 away from a tie. 1 good performance away from a tie. we all know Caleb's in a terrible situation there in Chicago, and we'll see how that all turns out for him in the future. Jared Goff with the Lions. To no one's surprise, I'm sure, he lands in the great tier. Out of a possible 17 games, he had 7 great performances, 6 good, 2 fine, 1 poor. Excuse me, I'm reading the wrong one again. 8 great, 8 good, 1 fine. So he was never below good. He was never below good. 8 great, 8 good, 1 fine. That's a pretty solid season for the Detroit Lions starter. Then we go to Green Bay with Jordan Love, who overwhelmingly spent the most time in the good tier. He had 2 great performances, 8 good, 2 fine, 1 poor. So overwhelmingly, Jordan Love lands in the good tier. I think that's a fair place to put him. I understand some Packers fans have some questions about him. I still think Jordan Love's a talented guy. He lands in the good tier. Also, my buddy Malik Willis, formerly of the Tennessee Titans, he played in 4 games for the Green Bay Packers. And remember, we said at least 3 starts or playing majority of the game gets you on here. And he spent majority of his time in the fine category. Malik Willis, out of 4 possible games, 1 great, 1 good, 2 fine. So Malik Willis goes into the fine tier. Last but not least in the NFC North is Sam Darnold, one of the shockers of the season. Sam Darnold goes into the great tier based on this. 7 great, 6 good, 2 fine, 1 poor, 1 trash. So he spent the most time of any of the tiers. Sam Darnold spent the most time in the great tier. So that's where Sam Darnold goes. And the NFC North just really beastly this year. Joe Burrow with the Cincinnati Bengals. He started all 17 games. And to absolutely no one's surprise, Joe Burrow lands in the great tier as well with 8 great performances, 7 good, 2 fine, and I think those 2 fine ones were early on in the season. This guy was just unbelievable. It's a shame for him that the Bengals didn't make the playoffs, but don't blame it on Joe Burrow. He was sensational. Then we get to the Pittsburgh Steelers with Justin Fields. Justin Fields started in 6 games for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and of those 6, he spent the most time in the fine tier. Justin Fields with 1 great performance, 1 good, and 4 fine. So Justin Fields lands in the fine tier. Russell Wilson. This is an interesting one. When Russell Wilson took over, out of 11 possible games, he had 1 great performance, 5 good, 1 fine, 4 poor. So technically, Russell Wilson is going to go into the good tier. But if I were having to do this right now, just based on where things stand now, he'd probably go down some because a lot of those, I think those 4 poor performances from Russell Wilson, I think all 4 of them were over the last 4 games. The drop-off for Russ from where he started to where he's ended up is pretty significant. Lamar Jackson, well, you already know where Lamar's going. Lamar's going into the great tier. Absolutely. Lamar Jackson, out of 17 games, 9 great performances, 6 good, 2 fine. So absolutely Lamar Jackson, well-deserved, goes into the great tier because obviously. And then we get to the Cleveland Browns. Deshaun Watson, so 6 possible games for Deshaun Watson, and he spent the most time in those games in the trash. Deshaun Watson with 2 fine, 1 poor, 3 trash. So Deshaun Watson goes in the trash. Jameis Winston, this is an interesting one. Jameis Winston had 1 week where he was great, 2 good, 2 trash, and then he had 2 where he just had his own tier that we just labeled Jameis. He had his own tier because he is such like an up and down guy, but we're gonna put Jameis in the trash, as bad as I hate to do it. And then Dorian Thompson-Robinson for the Browns also started in 3 games, and he was trash in all 3 of them. So he also goes in the trash. Every quarterback that the Browns put out there this season, all 3 of them go into the trash. Also worth noting that Bailey Zappi played majority of their game in Week 18, and he too was trash. So that's the NFC, or the AFC rather, North. Let's go to the NFC West with Geno Smith, who overwhelmingly goes into the good tier. Geno Smith ain't right back. 4 great, 9 good, 1 fine, 3 poor. So overwhelmingly, Geno Smith goes into the good category. It's a shame for the Seahawks. They got 10 wins and they still didn't make the playoffs. But Geno goes into the good category. Brock Purdy also finds his way into the good tier. Based on this list, he had a tie, actually. He had 5 great performances. He had 5 good performances. 1 fine, 3 poor, and then 1 trash. So I had to choose between great and good, and I choose to put Purdy into the good tier rather than great. I don't think anybody would dispute. Those guys in the great tier, Jaden Daniels, Josh Allen, Jared Goff, Sam Darnold, Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson, played at a higher level than Brock Purdy this year. I do think the 49ers are going to absolutely re-sign Brock Purdy to a big deal this offseason. Brock was good. I don't think he was at all the biggest problem in San Francisco, but I'm not willing to put him into the great tier. He's going into good. Matthew Stafford, this is interesting. This is an interesting one. Stafford, based on this list, goes into fine. Matthew Stafford had 6 great, 2 good, 7 fine, 1 poor. So he had, 7 fine, 6 great. There was a stretch there where Matt Stafford was playing some really great football, but then toward the end, he really just started putting together some meh performances for the Rams. So that lands him into the fine tier. Then we get to last in the NFC West, Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray, I was interested to see where this would go. 2 great, 5 good, 5 fine, 4 poor. So we had a tie between good and fine, and I've got to make a judgment call on where to put Kyler. And I'm sorry, I had to just put him in fine. I think this season has to go down as a letdown for Kyler Murray. Especially, there were times where he showed flashes of just greatness, but at the end of the day, just some flat performances down the stretch. Felt like this division was there for Arizona at one point this season, and they just totally fell apart. So I can't put Kyler into good. So Kyler will stay in the fine tier as we now shift over to the AFC West with Patrick Mahomes. Overwhelmingly, Patrick Mahomes is in the good tier. Now, I know Patrick Mahomes is that dude. We know he's got the Super Bowls. May get another one for all we know. But I had him with 4 great, 8 good, 4 fine. If you had to just judge Mahomes based on this season, I think this is what you would say. He's good. If you had never watched the NFL before, you would swear Jaden Daniels, Josh Allen, Jared Goff, Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson were absolutely better than this guy. You would not think Patrick Mahomes is the guy with all of the Super Bowl rings. But, he's Mahomes for a reason. He knows how to win. We'll see what they do in the playoffs. We get to the Raiders. Gardner Minshew spent most of his time in the trash. Gardner Minshew with 1 great performance, and I remember what it was. It was week 2 against the Ravens when he randomly went off. 3 fine, 2 poor, 4 trash. So Gardner Minshew goes in the trash. Aiden O'Connell also got 5 starts for the Raiders, and of those 5 starts, he spent majority of his time in the fine tier. The fine tier for Aiden O'Connell. What do you want me to do? He's a backup quarterback and nothing more. So that's where he goes. Now this one is going to be controversial because I don't even believe this. Justin Herbert, based on these tier rankings, goes into fine. I don't know, man. I don't know how I got this so screwed up. But according to this, Justin Herbert goes into the fine tier. I think a lot of people would argue that Justin Herbert should be in the great tier. But based on this, 5 great, 4 good, 8 fine for Justin Herbert is what I had. So all in all, Justin Herbert goes into the fine tier. I'm going to get roasted for that. That's just where he landed. Then Bo Nix, the rookie. Based on this, he lands in the good tier. Bo Nix lands in the good tier. And, I was just shocked at the season that he had. He was just sensational. 4 great, 7 good, 3 fine, 2 poor, 1 trash. And the 1 trash was week 1. So, Bo Nix, just sensational. We get to the NFC South with Baker. And Baker Mayfield had 7 great, 7 good, 3 fine. So we got a tie between great and good, and I've got to decide. And you know what? Dang it. I'm putting Baker into great. I think Baker Mayfield was absolutely great this season, leading Tampa Bay. Now, he had a stretch there where things got rough when Mike Evans went out. Also, Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin never came back. But with Mike Evans, Baker, I just am continually impressed with the way that he played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this season. And I'm interested to see what they do in the playoffs since they won the NFC South. But I thought Baker was great this season. Bryce Young with the Panthers. Let's see here. Bryce, overall, lands in the fine category. And first of all, I think if you're a Panthers fan, you would have taken that with the way he started the season. I think he started the season with 3 straight trash performances. He got benched. It was just awful. You would take fine based on that. But really, Bryce had 4 good performances, 1 great one in Week 18. So Bryce Young is heading in the right direction, even though he lands in the fine tier here. Bryce Young ended the season with those good performances that you see. It wasn't enough to catch up with the fine, but he ended the season with good performances. Andy Dalton also played in 5 games for the Panthers, and he spent majority of his time in the trash. Andy Dalton had 1 great performance, 1 good, 1 poor, 2 trash. So Andy Dalton goes into the trash. Derek Carr for the Saints. Not surprising, Derek Carr lands in the fine tier because Derek Carr, that's just where he belongs. On a quarterback tier ranking, Derek Carr is just fine. He's not going to do anything overly great. He's not going to wow you, but he'll do okay. And he had 2 great. Both of those were in week 1 and week 2. 2 good, 4 fine, 2 poor. And then Spencer Rattler also played in 7 games, and he spent majority of his time in the trash. He did have 2 good performances. One of those was in week 18. 1 fine, 4 trash performances for Spencer Rattler. So Spencer Rattler lands in the trash. We get to Kirk Cousins with the Falcons, and I'm just telling you where he ended up here. Kirk Cousins ended up fine. Now, that may seem too good for a dude that got benched after getting paid $180 million. But I had a tie, is what I had. He had 4 great performances, 3 good, 4 fine, 1 poor, 2 trash. So I had to make a decision between great or fine for Kirk Cousins. Which one would I think sums him up? And I had to go fine. I can't put a dude that got benched when you know that's not what they wanted to do, but a dude that ended up playing so badly that he got benched, can't put you in the great tier or the good tier. The best you're going to get is fine. And then Michael Penix, who did play in 3 games for the Falcons, and in that limited time, he spent majority of his time in the good tier. And it is going to be strange to see him listed there along Mahomes, Purdy, Nix, Jordan Love. It's just a different kind of good. We had a limited time, the expectations, the situation he was put in. He had 1 fine, 2 good. So he goes into the good tier. Then we get to our division, the AFC South, and we start with hopes and dreams himself, Anthony Richardson. 2 good, 3 fine, 2 poor, 3 trash. So we have a tie between fine and trash. And I've got to decide where Anthony Richardson goes. This dude got benched. This dude made some awful decisions. This dude tapped himself out of a game. This dude was too sore to play in the last couple of weeks. Hope he's doing okay. I'm putting him in the trash. Did he do some good things along the way? Sure. But, I mean, am I supposed to just gloss over some of this awful stuff that we're seeing from him in games? Like, and I know some Colts fans are going to watch and be like, well, you guys got Will Levis. I'm about to get to him. Joe Flacco. Based on the games that Joe Flacco played in, he landed in the good tier. Flacco, 1 great, 3 good, 1 fine, 1 poor, 1 trash. So, overwhelmingly, Joe Flacco lands in the good tier. Then we get to Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence, who hasn't played in a while. But, just to show you I'm not biased, based on this tier ranking, Trevor would go into good. Trevor, 1 great, 3 good, 2 fine, 2 poor, 1 trash. So the tier he spent the most time in was the good one. So good for you, Trevor. Mac Jones played a good chunk for the Jags this year, and he spent majority of his time in the fine tier. I think Mac Jones proved himself to be a pretty good, reliable backup quarterback. I think Mac Jones will be in the NFL a while if he can keep playing backup quarterback like that. C.J. Stroud for the Texans. Davis Mills got 1 start for them in Week 18. Or not a start, but he played majority of the game. But C.J. Stroud was their guy all year. I think he regressed tremendously, but he spent the most time in the good tier. 2 great, 6 good, 3 fine, 4 poor, 1 trash for C.J. Stroud. I don't think that tells the entire story. I think C.J. Stroud has greatly regressed, but whatever. That's where he spent the most time, was good. Then we get to our guys with the Tennessee Titans, starting with Mason Rudolph. According to my tier rankings, in Mason Rudolph's games, he spent the most time in the fine tier. I mean, most of the backup quarterbacks end up in the fine tier. I had 1 good, 4 fine, 2 poor. I mean, that's just kind of what you get with Mason Rudolph. It's fine. Like it's not going to win you any games, but maybe he can hold on and prevent you from losing a couple. And we're going to end it with Will Levis. This is, listen to this. For Will Levis, we had, now hold on here, 3 good, 2 fine, 3 poor, and 3 trash. So we have a 3-way tie between good, poor, or trash. Now you may say, how did Will Levis have 3 good performances this season? Well, he did. He had a stretch in the middle against Minnesota, Houston, and Washington, a 3-game stretch where he randomly played better before he reverted back to what he was doing. So that's where the 3 good come from. If I had to guess what the 3 trash ones were, I would say Bears, Bengals. I don't know. It could be any of them. And then 3 poor. So we got a 3-way tie. So I've got to decide whether I'm going to put Will into the good tier, the poor tier, or the trash tier. Well, let's go ahead and eliminate good. I'm going to be honest. For what we needed from him, Will goes in the trash. I hate to do that. That's never where I wanted this thing to go. That's never how I wanted it to be. But based on expectations and what we needed from him, you got benched. So I'm going to be fair. If I'm going to put AR in there, I'm going to put Will too. AR is better than Will, but not enough. In the great tier for 2024 season, let's put a bow on it. Jaden Daniels, Josh Allen, Jared Goff, Sam Darnold, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and Baker Mayfield in the great tier. Some people would say that's too high for Baker. I don't. I think Baker was great. 7 guys in the great tier. Let me know what you think of that. In the good tier, here we go. Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, Drake May, Tua Tagovailoa, Jordan Love, Russell Wilson, Geno Smith, Brock Purdy, Patrick Mahomes, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Joe Flacco, Trevor Lawrence, C.J. Stroud. In the fine tier, Cooper Rush, Jacoby Brissett, Aaron Rodgers, Caleb Williams, Malik Willis, Justin Fields, Matthew Stafford, Kyler Murray, Aiden O'Connell, Justin Herbert. That's my biggest regret here. He does not belong on a tier with these guys. Bryce Young, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, Mac Jones, and Mason Rudolph. In the poor tier, it is Drew Lock and Snoop Huntley. In the trash, Daniel Jones, Deshaun Watson, Jameis Winston, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, every quarterback that played for the Browns. Gardner Minshew, Andy Dalton, Spencer Rattler, Anthony Richardson, and Will Levis. Ta-da. Based on the entire year. Tighten up.